I was kidnapped for 12 hours, and I can't shake the silence. I don't know why I'm posting this. I guess I just need to get it out. For the past 2 weeks, I haven't been able to sleep without hearing footsteps behind me, without jumping at every car that pulls up next to me. There's a part of me that wants to forget it, but the other part knows I can't. Maybe writing this down will help me process it. 2 weeks ago, I was living my usual routine. I work from home, so my days blur together. That Friday evening, I had spent hours staring at a screen, replying to emails and typing up reports. It wasn't until around 8:30 p.m. that I realized I was out of coffee. I wasn't planning on leaving the apartment, but there was nothing else to do, and I really needed coffee if I was going to survive the weekend. I grabbed my keys, threw on my jacket, and headed out the door. It was the same 5-minute walk I took every time I needed something from the corner shop. Nothing special, just a normal evening, no different than any other. The streets weren't particularly busy, but they weren't deserted either. A few cars were parked along the curb, and I passed a couple of people walking in the opposite direction. The air was crisp, and I could see my breath as I exhaled. I remember thinking how peaceful the evening felt, like one of those quiet moments before something happens that makes you realize you should have been paying more attention. I didn't even give the van a second thought when I saw it parked outside the store. It was white, unmarked, with the engine off. There was no one around it, just an empty van. It was the first time I'd seen something like that. People parked there all the time. I'm sure I wasn't the only one who thought it was out of place, but I didn't think much of it. Inside the store, everything was normal. The aisles were dimly lit, the shelves stocked with the usual items. The cashier barely looked at me when I grabbed my coffee and paid. There were no other customers, and it was oddly quiet. The flickering overhead light gave the place a strange atmosphere, but nothing about it screamed danger. I grabbed my change, said a quick thanks, and turned to leave. When I stepped outside, I saw the van again, the same one, but this time there was a man standing by it, talking on a cell phone. I remember noticing how he looked like he didn't fit in with the quiet street, like he was out of place. But again, I didn't think much of it. People talk on their phones all the time. I started walking back towards my apartment, my mind on the coffee I was about to make. And then I heard footsteps. It was subtle at first, just a soft echo of footsteps behind me. I told myself it was nothing, just someone walking at the same pace. But then it happened again. The footsteps matched mine. Whoever it was keeping pace with me, walking just a little too close. I glanced behind me, but didn't see anyone. I kept walking, trying to push the unease aside, but then the footsteps grew louder. Someone was definitely behind me now. I could hear them clearly, just a step or two behind. My heart started to race, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe they were just walking in the same direction, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I picked up my pace. The footsteps behind me quickened. I turned the corner onto my street, walking faster now, almost breaking into a jog. The footsteps matched my every move. My breathing became shallow, and panic set in. I glanced over my shoulder again. And there he was, the man from the van. He was standing just a few feet behind me now, staring straight ahead. I couldn't make out his face in the dim streetlight, but something in his posture made my blood run cold. He wasn't running after me, but he wasn't walking casually either. He was just there. Before I could even process what was happening, he grabbed my arm, pulling me back towards the van. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I was frozen, like my body was too terrified to react. His grip tightened around my wrists, and I was dragged across the street, back to that damn van. I tried to pull away, but I was too weak. He shoved me inside, into the dark, cramped back seat of the van. I didn't even have time to think. The man slammed the door shut, and I felt a sharp prick in my neck. My head spun. I didn't lose consciousness completely, but everything started to blur. My thoughts felt foggy, like I wasn't sure if what was happening was real or just some kind of nightmare. The van drove for what felt like an eternity. The road was bumpy, and I could feel every turn, but I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't process what was happening. I was too scared to even scream. When the van finally stopped, I didn't know where we were. The men didn't say anything. They just pulled me out of the van and led me into a small, windowless room. My head was spinning, and I could barely stay upright. I was shoved into a chair. My arms were strained by zip ties. The room was bare, just concrete walls, a single light hanging from the ceiling, and a door that looked too solid to break through. And then, silence. It felt like I was in there for hours. No sounds, no voices, no movement. The only thing I could hear was my own heartbeat, thumping loudly in my ears. I kept expecting them to say something, to explain what was happening. But nothing. No one came in. No one spoke to me. Not even a single question. I kept thinking, this can't be real. They'll let me go. This is just some mistake. But the longer I sat there, the more I realized how wrong I was. I wasn't going anywhere. Hours passed. I don't know how long, but it felt like days. I started to lose track of time, and I could feel myself slipping. My hands were numb from the restraints, my mind drifting in and out of clarity. Finally, someone came into the room. A man in a suit. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me for a moment, checked something off on the clipboard, and nodded. I wasn't sure what was going on, but I had the overwhelming sense that I was being watched. They cut the zip ties without a word. They forced me into the van again. I didn't protest. I didn't even try to ask questions. I just followed. I was too exhausted. The ride back felt shorter. This time, they didn't stop anywhere. The van drove through quiet streets, and when it finally stopped, they shoved me out the door and onto the sidewalk. Just like that. The door slammed shut behind me, and the van sped off into the night. I was left standing there, not knowing what had just happened, not knowing why. I stood there for what felt like forever, too afraid to move. I don't know how I made it back to my apartment. I don't remember walking there. My body moved on autopilot. When I got inside, I locked the door and just sat in the dark. I was too terrified to even turn on the lights. I called the police, but when I told them what happened, they didn't believe me. They took my statement, but they couldn't find any evidence. No cameras, no witnesses, nothing. I haven't felt safe since. Every time I leave my apartment, I feel like someone is watching me. Every time I hear a van in the distance, my heart races. I don't know who those men were or why they took me, but the silence. That silence is the part that haunts me the most. What were they waiting for? Why didn't they say a word? The silence felt deliberate, like they were testing me, watching me, waiting for something. I still don't know if they'll come back. I don't know if I'm safe, and that uncertainty is the worst part. My podcast went too far. When I was in high school, from 2011 to 2015, there really weren't podcasts. You had your typical radio shows with the big voices of radio who just dominated it. Their voices would start your day every weekday morning. In between the music you either hate or loved. I loved listening to the raspy treble in some of their voices, like Jim Kerr, or to hear the smoothness of someone's voice, like Delia. My favorite, of course, was Howard Stern. My dad let me listen to Stern's radio show, and I just absolutely adored it. The show was funny, brash, and crazy. By the time I started college and went to school for a business degree, podcasts started becoming really popular. It was a dream come true for me. I didn't need expensive equipment or to rent out a studio. I could stream it from my laptop. I saved up money for my job as an office assistant and got myself a good microphone. The rest was history. I started streaming on Spotify and YouTube mainly. I didn't make it as big as someone like Joe Rogan or a lot of these other guys, but I had a decently sizable following. My topic wasn't comedy, politics, or gossip. It was a true crime podcast, mainly covering crime in the rural Northeast. Since I lived in upstate New York, I felt that to be my proper niche. I covered current murders and even past ones, famous and obscure, that had happened in the region's history. I had to stop because I almost became a victim. The date was January 23rd, 2017. My podcast I had was more of a hobby. On this day, a prostitute washed ashore in Maine, near Acadia. Her mouth had been carved into a permanent smile, and her eyelids were removed with precision. Her head had been cut off and crudely stitched back on. Her tongue and teeth had been removed. The rest of her body was intact, save for words carved into her stomach. Horror of the Lord. I felt pretty gross, as this would be my breakout, since I had a friend that worked for a major media outlet that kind of leaked me this info. I immediately did an episode, got 200,000 views after 5 days. That was the episode that put me on the map, and I began getting royalties. I felt good. I would do extra long episodes when I got new information about this gruesome murder. After a couple of months, new info started slowing down. Then someone named Kenzie reached out, and she claimed to have worked with the victim. April 3rd, 2017. Episode 86. Interview with Kenzie, friend of the Acadia murder victim.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. This is Brian with Northeast Crime. Today is a special episode, as I have a guest here with me that knew the victim of the Acadia murder.
Hello. My name is Kenzie. The victim's name, which her family has asked not to reveal, will also not be revealed here. I want to respect that and make that boundary first and foremost.
Kenzie began to tear up. I quietly pushed a box of tissues closer to her.
You say she has a family. Were they involved while you two were working?
You can say it. We're all adults. We were prostitutes. She would always tell me how her family wanted her to come back. She had issues with her dad, who ended up leaving when she was 16. After that, when she turned 18, she hooked up with some guys and started doing sex work.
She was still in contact with her family regularly?
Yes, I met her relatively early on in her career. Her and I started working for a more high-end person, and we do good parties, high-end orgies, masquerade balls, and even birthday and bachelor parties for rich families.
Suffice to say, you guys made quite a bit of money.
I love it. I voluntarily went into this. People think you're useless, or abused, or you're desperate and have nothing else. I had an overbearing family and found the way to make damned good money. That's it. My mom wanted me to go into finance or some shit. I'm 23 now and making 6 figures.
So you're telling me there's a stigma around sex work, which I agree there is, especially in this country. Do you think that stigma led to a lack of protection for you and your friend? Do you think it got her killed?
Brian, that's a deep question. And this is something I believe. Yes, it is. Even if I'm just a hooker in some alleyway in a big city, or a high-end lady of the night, as they call us, we still are putting ourselves out there, and people still judge us harshly in movies and even in real life. When one of us gets murdered, of course it's one of them. They have no one to look or care for them. Every fucking time.
Kenzie put her hand over her face and began to cry.
Take all the time you need, Kenzie. I know this isn't easy.
Kenzie took a deep breath, dabbed under her eyes with a tissue, and resumed.
I'm not close to my family, but I call or text every once in a while. We don't agree, but we still care. We still send updates to show we care or to know we are doing well. The victim did the same thing with her family. We have people. She had people. All of us who fall victim to these sick folks have people who care for us.
Absolutely. I mean, even though so many people believe that stereotype, it's disproven quite a bit.
Exactly. Now, we didn't have PIMs. We weren't owned. We were kind of contracted out. We kept nearly 70% of our earnings. The rest we just paid off a company that specializes in escorts. They'll do background checks on the guys that hired us. I mean, it was secure shit.
But some assholes still fall through the cracks.
Yeah, this one guy came to us. He had a well-trimmed beard and a nice body, from what she told me. He was Caucasian, about 6 feet tall, and had brown hair. Everywhere was brown. His eyes were blue, and he had this tattoo on his left shoulder of a snake with some weird writing. That was it.
What else stood out about him besides the tattoo?
The victim said he was rough with her. Real rough. They got into a room and he pushed her, threw shit, and ended up yanking her arm too hard that it caused a bruise. She didn't do anything wrong with him. One of our security guards handled him. Then 2 months later, she's fucking dead. It's him.
Have you told the police this info?
Kenzie started snickering.
What the fuck did we just talk about? They're the biggest part of the problem. They don't give a fuck about us. To them, we're criminals too. They think some sick pervert is just crime taking care of itself. Fuck them dirty pigs.
Well, Kenzie, thank you for entrusting me with this info. Seriously, I hope this helps catch this man. and could give the victim's family closure.
The episode lasted another hour and a half. I was contacted by the police to give another report on what was said, and was asked for permission to use the recording as evidence. 2 months after the episode went live, Kenzie washed up dead on the shore of Acadia, in the same fashion as the first victim. Some people started commenting under my videos that I was a piece of shit profiting off dead and tortured women. I half felt they were correct, but I reassured myself they weren't. I was bringing awareness to this awful shit, and I hope to bring the motherfucker to justice. June 13th, 2017, episode 95. This episode started off normal. I had a topic to discuss the murder, and then segments of documented murders committed during the Salem witch trials. 10 minutes after I started, I received a call from the viewer phone. I wasn't taking calls today, but decided to answer it.
Hello, this is Brian with True Crime Northeast. I'm not taking viewer calls today, but I've decided to shake things up a bit. Where are you calling from, viewer?
There was a deep breath on the other end of the line, then the sound of tapping.
Hello?
Hey, Brian. Let's get straight to the point. I'm the Acadia killer.
The man's voice was a bit creepy, but it had to be an exaggeration. His voice mainly sounded average. I started to feel nervous. My hand began to shake. I did my best to remain calm and collected for the camera.
I don't appreciate pranks when talking about heavy topics like this.
It's not a prank. The first victim's name was Elisa. Verify with the police if it's correct. How the fuck else would I know? Anyway, I loved the podcast you did with Kenzie. She was so overprotective of Elisa. She was there the night I get kicked out from Elisa's room. Man, they were all yelling. I knocked that little whore around pretty damn well. Gave her some bruising, as you know.
I didn't know what to say or how to respond, so I came up with a generic question.
Why do any of this?
The killer laughed, his breathy laughs causing static over the phone.
I bet you wouldn't hear a story about how my mommy was a prostitute and didn't know my daddy, or how my parents beat and molested me, or some other Freudian bullshit. Truth is, I grew up in a wonderfully religious household. Not religious enough. I met some men who believed this shit was wrong. Sex isn't a commodity.
So you hire prostitutes and murder people since you're so righteous?
The time has come for consequences. People need to be made examples of. Jesus may have preached peace, but he used force against those selling commodities at the temple.
Why did you seek out these services? Inner conflict? Do you like sex but feel guilty for it?
The killer didn't respond immediately. There was noticeable silence for a minute.
Hello?
Listen here, you smug cocksucker. Do not use those words against me. I am a man of harsh piety.
What's the snake on your shoulder?
The snake represents the serpent, the ones who tempted Eve and then in turn Adam. The snake represents sin. It's there on me and my friends as a reminder that we all have the mark of the beast, that we must cleanse from this earth and ourselves, one at a time. Stay tuned for the next one.
The killer hung up. I couldn't go any further. I ended the episode. Some comments left under my video still stated that I profited from their deaths, and also endangered the second girl. I kept convincing myself that wasn't the case. 3 weeks after that, a third body had been found in Albany, with the same markings, bruises, and condition as the other 2 bodies. I felt scared, as the killings had now come closer to me in upstate New York. The cops knocked on my door and asked me a bunch of questions. Was the first girl's name really Elisa? I asked. The cop nodded. Now I felt even less safe. I denied that the killer contacted me in any other way. I even denied seeing any strange people or being followed. I wasn't stopping the podcast. I wanted this bastard to contact me again. September 21st, episode 98.
If you're there, the line is open and waiting for you. You killed a woman in Albany now. Why
The phone rang, and I immediately answered.
That wasn't a woman. That was a whore. A whore to be punished. And look at that. It wasn't a self-proclaimed classy one like the other ones claimed to be. She was a lowly one, hustling in the filthy streets at night.
You killed the closer to where the podcast takes place. Was there a reason for that?
I go where I'm needed.
Who needs a murderer like you?
The world. The world must know of what is happening. The reckoning to come. The serpent will not win.
You know, you seem to be a clean-cut and well-spoken man, but you sound unhinged. Do you have a history of mental illness?
Oh, if God is mental illness to you, then you are lost.
Bingo. I got this son of a bitch where I wanted him. My friend, Alex, who usually watches in the distance, started aggressively shaking his head no. I was painting a target on my back, which is what I wanted from this killer. I profited off those two girls, maybe even put the second in danger, so why not put an end to this?
Ye still there? Brian the podcaster, defender of whores and sinners?
I started to smirk. This bastard was unraveling.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Good. I hope you're listening.
I heard the phone rustling, then heard a tap. A woman was whimpering and heavily breathing in the background.
This is what happens to those who bring sin to this earth, who choose to defile against God Himself.
I heard something move. Then the woman began to scream. The killer laughed.
I carved a different special message for you, Brian. You'll see it very soon.
Leave the woman alone, you son of a bitch. Leave her the fuck alone.
The killer ignored my pleas and continued to laugh. The woman's screaming ended, but the killer's laughing and sounds of cutting flesh remained.
I will now fix her back up to get her ready for her debut as a new woman. You'll see in a couple of days. Brian, good day.
3 days later, the woman's body was found outside of the University of Buffalo campus without a head. Everything was the same as the previous 3 bodies, but the stomach carving was different. It said, "Hello, Brian." Police had shown up at my house and were told they needed to watch me as they now felt I was in danger. Good. Hopefully I could draw this cocksucker out. My friend Alex hated my plan and yelled at me for even being in the middle of this. But this was the power of radio, the dream I had since I was a kid. Radio and media brought people together, brought shit to the light. This son of a bitch killing women, taking advantage of them, was going to be caught. Him and whoever he felt was backing him. September 24th, 2017, episode 99. The police, hidden from my cameras, had their recording devices set up. They wanted backups and sound experts and whatnot to hear all this shit, so maybe they can narrow in on the bastard. I started the intro, but the phone rang.
You love this shit, don't you?
I don't appreciate your tone. I can leave and let your podcast numbers dwindle, Brian. That wouldn't be good for you.
Why do you call?
I asked, reading from one of the detective's notepads.
I want to be heard. The message of salvation and violent redemption must be spread. And it's not just horrors. No one is safe.
What do you mean?
Everyone is a sinner. Some more than others. No one is safe from judgment, especially the wicked women I have slain.
They were earning a living. What was wicked about them?
Your ignorance is your undoing, Brian.
Okay. You said I was a horrible sinner. Am I on the same level as these women?
Yes, you profited from them, harbored them, and continued to defend them. We are not happy.
We?
I told you, the man who discovered me when I was younger, the man who has shown me the way.
Did you send anyone after me? Your crimes have gotten closer to me.
Luke 21:28. So when all these things begin to happen, stand and look up, for your salvation is near. See you soon, Brian.
The call ended. I ended the episode there. The next day, I woke up and saw the cops in the unmarked car across my street. I felt paranoid. This man, or his cronies, could strike at any moment. Then, the doorbell rang. I looked outside and saw a man in a black hoodie running away. One of the cops started yelling, got out of the car, and started chasing the man. I went out, and like a dumbass, opened the package. The cop that stayed was screaming at me not to do it. I ignored him. Inside the package was a severed head with a crown of thorns. Shoved inside the mouth was what looked like a dildo. I dropped the package, feeling dizzy and nauseous. I almost fell off my porch. Scribbled on the outside of the box was a crude drawing of a serpent with the word Brian next to it. October 12th, 2017, episode 100.
Sorry to everyone out there. As an update, the killer sent a mutilated, severed head to my door. He found out where I lived and is fucking with me. I have police protection and I have almost 250,000 subscribers behind me. Information is the ultimate tool, and you will be taken down.
The phone rang. I picked it up. The detective started recording.
I hope you enjoyed the gift, Brian. It's a little bit of an indulgence for me. I've been so careful through it all. Gloves, hairnets, hazmat suits, burner phones, and using real estate with no tracing to me.
What's your point? Do you want to be found?
Silence. I heard an audible gulp.
Well,
It's your 100th episode. A milestone, indeed. And you're doing nothing special for it?
I'm talking to you.
A knock at my door. A woman. An officer from the car was screaming not to open it into the walkie-talkie. The woman undressed, and a bomb was strapped to her. Everything happened in a blur, and I almost didn't believe it. She was crying. An explosion then occurred, sending debris everywhere, ringing in my ears. I stood up and sat down, getting my bearings. Why the fuck wasn't I moved into protection? They're using me as bait. That's okay. I need to catch this guy. I have to bring him out. The podcast was off. Then the phone rang again.
I hope you enjoyed my gift. I don't have many more for you. I hope you see the error of your ways and repent.
The call ended. I passed out. In the hospital, I was treated for a concussion and some deep gashes I didn't know I had. I also broke my arm somehow, I guess when I fell off the chair. I spoke to the detectives that were still up on the case. Another 2 bodies turned up, both of them this time being found in White Plains, where I currently live. 2 bodies washed up, one in Albany, the one whose head was in the box, and one was blown up. Then 2 more near me, 6 women. The second one found in White Plains had a cross carved into her stomach. Stapled to her right arm was a note that read, "More to come, Brian." When I was discharged 2 weeks later, I was put up in a townhouse near the precinct. 2 officers watched outside, and 1 stayed inside with me. I turned on the news. 3 more women found dead in White Plains. 2 of them prostitutes, and 1 a stripper. All of them had my name carved into their stomachs. Then the good news came. A man was apprehended 3 blocks away, carrying a gun in the street. He matched the description Kenzie gave. Tall, built well, white, with clean, brown hair and mustache. The tattoo of the serpent on his right shoulder was there, too. When he was apprehended, he laughed, saying he planned it this way, and salvation was near. The court case began. I was kept in a police van, hidden from the rest of the crowd out there. I climbed out of the back of the van and saw the man being hauled in by cops into the court. One man wearing a surgical mask and trench coat hopped the barrier. He started screaming, "Salvation," before being shot at. He opened up his jacket, revealing explosives. He set them off, killing himself, the cops escorting his friend, and the serial killer. 2 days later, 5 men were found in a warehouse written in the killer's notepad. Each of them with the same tattoo of the serial killer. Cyanide was found at the scene, and a note saying "Salvation" was taped to each of them. Since then, I quit the podcast and also changed my major to journalism. Never let the bad guys get away. Thank you all for listening, and have a wonderful day.